It's 1953, Seoul is in ruins, and the average Korean makes about $67 a year. Fast forward 70 years, and South Korea is pumping out some of the world's most advanced vehicles, challenging giants like Toyota and BMW, while Korean drivers are dropping serious cash on luxury rides that would make most Americans do a double take. How did a nation rebuild from absolute devastation to become an automotive powerhouse where the car you drive isn't just transportation, but a symbol of an economic miracle? Stick around because what you're about to discover will completely change how you see those Hyundai and Kia badges on the road. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why Wall Street analysts are betting billions on Korean automakers. But before we dive into this incredible journey, if you love stories about economics, cars, and underdog victories, smash that like button right now and subscribe because we're just getting started with content that'll blow your mind. Hey, this is Mark, and you're welcome to AUTOSAYS. Now here's where things get interesting because South Korea's car story isn't just about manufacturing, it's about national survival, strategic finance, and cultural transformation that'll make you rethink everything you know about economic development. Let me take you back to the beginning, to a country so devastated that owning any vehicle, even a bicycle, was considered a luxury. The Korean War had left the peninsula split, infrastructure destroyed, and the South Korean economy was literally on life support, ranking among the poorest nations on Earth, somewhere between Ghana and the Philippines. But here's the thing that nobody talks about. The Korean government made a calculated bet that would either catapult them to prosperity or sink them into debt for generations. They looked at Japan's post-war recovery and said, "We're going to do that, but faster and bigger." In 1962, President Park Chung-hee launched the first 5-year economic development plan, and automobiles weren't just included, they were central to the entire strategy. Think about the audacity of that decision for a second. This is a country where most people were still recovering from war trauma, where rice was more valuable than currency, and the government decides to pour resources into building cars. The financial structure they created was unprecedented. The government directed banks to provide low-interest loans to companies willing to enter heavy industries, essentially subsidizing the entire automotive dream with taxpayer money and borrowed capital. Hyundai Motor Company was founded in 1967, and here's what's absolutely wild. Their first car, the Cortina, was just assembled from knockdown kits from Ford. They weren't even building their own cars yet. They were basically putting together automotive IKEA furniture. But founder Chung Ju-young had a vision that seemed insane to outsiders. He wanted Korea to design and manufacture its own vehicles within a decade. Wall Street would have laughed him out of the room, except he wasn't asking Wall Street, he was leveraging government-backed financing and national pride as collateral. By 1975, Hyundai launched the Pony, South Korea's first domestically designed car, engineered with help from British and Italian designers, but manufactured entirely in Korea. Now you might be thinking, okay, so they made a car, big deal. But here's where the economic genius reveals itself. The domestic market was protected by massive import tariffs, sometimes exceeding 200%, which meant foreign cars were prohibitively expensive for average Koreans. This created a captive market where Korean manufacturers could refine their processes, achieve economies of scale, and generate revenue that would fuel expansion, all while international competitors were locked out. The government essentially created a financial incubator, and Korean companies used it to get strong enough to compete globally. Fast forward to the 1980s, and something remarkable happens in Korean culture. The car stops being just transportation and becomes a status symbol tied directly to the nation's economic ascent. As Korean companies like Samsung, LG, and Daewoo exploded onto the global stage, the newly wealthy Korean middle class wanted vehicles that reflected their success. But here's the twist. They didn't just want any luxury car, they wanted Korean luxury cars. Because owning a Genesis or an Equus meant you were part of the economic miracle. You were living proof that Korea had arrived. The psychology here is fascinating because it mirrors what happened in America during the 1950s, when owning a Cadillac meant you'd achieved the American dream. For Koreans, their domestic luxury vehicles represented the Korean dream. The idea that hard work and national solidarity could transform poverty into prosperity within a single generation. And the numbers back this up. By the 1990s, South Korea's per capita income had increased over 100-fold from those post-war days, and car ownership rates skyrocketed from virtually zero to one of the highest in Asia. But let's talk about the financial risks, because this story isn't all triumph. There's real danger woven throughout. The 1997 Asian financial crisis nearly destroyed everything Korean automakers had built. The Korean won lost half its value almost overnight, companies were drowning in foreign debt, and Kia Motors actually declared bankruptcy. Imagine working for decades to build an industry, seeing your country transform, and then watching it all potentially collapse because of currency speculation and over-leveraged balance sheets. The IMF stepped in with a bailout, but the conditions were brutal. Structural reforms, mass layoffs, and a complete restructuring of how Korean businesses operated. Hyundai acquired Kia in a fire sale merger that seemed desperate at the time, but would prove to be strategically brilliant. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Instead of retreating after the crisis, Korean automakers doubled down on quality and innovation. They looked at their near-death experience and said, "Never again will we be vulnerable like this," and they made decisions that seemed financially crazy, but strategically perfect. Hyundai introduced the industry's first 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty in America in 1999, right when the company was still recovering from financial catastrophe. Think about that risk, guaranteeing your products for a decade when you're barely solvent. But it worked, because it forced them to actually build better cars, and it completely changed consumer perception in the crucial American market. The warranty wasn't just marketing, it was a financial commitment that backed their engineering improvements with real money, and American buyers noticed. Sales exploded, and suddenly, Korean cars weren't cheap alternatives, they were legitimate competitors with unbeatable value propositions. Now let's connect this to what's happening today, because the story gets even more compelling. South Korea has one of the world's highest rates of luxury car ownership per capita, but here's the kicker. They're increasingly buying their own brands. Genesis, Hyundai's luxury division launched in 2015, is outselling traditional European luxury brands in Korea. And that's not just patriotism. These vehicles legitimately compete with BMW and Mercedes on quality, technology, and performance. The financial implications are massive, because luxury vehicles carry profit margins 3 to 4 times higher than economy cars, which means Korean automakers are now playing in the most lucrative segment of the global market. But there's more to this cultural shift. In Korea, the car you drive is directly tied to your social status and career success in ways that Americans might find extreme. A young professional driving a Genesis signals they've made it, while someone in a base model Kia might be seen as still climbing the ladder. This isn't shallow, it's a cultural reflection of a society that transformed itself through collective economic ambition, where visible success markers matter because they represent national achievement. And the Korean government continues to play a role, pushing automakers toward electric vehicles and autonomous technology with the same strategic vision that launched the industry 60 years ago. Korea aims to become a top 3 player in the global EV market by 2030, with massive government investments in battery technology, charging infrastructure, and R&D subsidies. We're watching the same playbook that created the industry now being used to transform it, and smart investors are paying attention, because Korean battery manufacturers like LG Energy Solution and Samsung SDI are already dominating global supply chains. Here's something that'll surprise you. South Korea's automotive industry now accounts for about 12% of the country's GDP and employs over 2 million people directly and indirectly. That's an entire economic sector built from rubble in less than a human lifetime, and the ripple effects touch everything from steel production to semiconductor manufacturing to financial services. The Korean model of government-directed industrial policy mixed with corporate ambition has become a case study in business schools worldwide. But it's also controversial because it required authoritarian control in its early stages, massive debt accumulation, and the sacrifice of an entire generation's quality of life to build future prosperity. Was it worth it? Well, South Korea is now the 10th largest economy on Earth, Korean cars are everywhere from Los Angeles to Lagos, and the country went from aid recipient to aid donor in record time. The automotive industry was both symbol and engine of that transformation, proving that strategic capital allocation, protected markets during development phases, and long-term vision can overcome almost any initial disadvantage. But here's the final twist that brings everything full circle. As Korean automakers dominate globally, they're facing the same challenges that once threatened Western manufacturers: rising labor costs, market saturation, and disruptive technology shifts toward electrification and autonomy. The question now is whether they can adapt as quickly as they rose, whether the financial engineering and strategic vision that built the industry can transform it again for a future where software matters more than horsepower and batteries replace engines. The next chapter of South Korea's car culture is being written right now, and the stakes are just as high as they were in 1962, because in today's automotive world, if you're not leading the EV revolution, you're becoming obsolete. So when you see that Hyundai Ioniq 5 or Kia EV6 on American roads, you're not just looking at a car. You're looking at decades of calculated risk, national ambition, cultural transformation, and financial strategy that turned a war-torn nation into an automotive powerhouse. And that's a story worth remembering every single time you turn a key or press a start button.